The transition was seamless. A crack in the radio was the only indication that something had happened, cutting off our contact with Earth. For some reason, the radio signals couldn't penetrate the gateway. A wondrous sight greeted us. The star, filtered through a partly cracked, orange-tinted dome that covered the entire sky, shone down on a dark and silent cityscape filled with skyscrapers taller than anything ever built on Earth. They were all black silhouettes against the rising sun. Outside of the dome, tons of twisted metal and enormous chunks of broken structures floated through space. Two things became immediately clear to us after seeing this. We were standing on a space platform, large enough to allow for its own gravity. Indeed, a part of an attempted Dyson swarm. And that at some point between when the message was sent to Earth and now, their entire civilization was either abandoned or destroyed. Another enormous platform came into view, solemnly rising at the horizon like a black flower and casting its giant hexagonal shadow on top of us. It was ripped apart in the middle by unimaginable ancient forces, letting through a sunbeam that illuminated the landscape in front of us. Large steps climbed down from the gateway, and the rover we had sent through lay crashed against the ground beneath them. The gateway stood at the edge of a large oval square that was surrounded by identical gateways, indicating that the people who built this civilization had sent out many messages to the stars and patiently waited for answers. The dog came running toward us from the middle of the square, proving that the platform was pressurized and filled with oxygen. Taking off our helmets was out of the question though, since we didn't know what other gases or possibly even pathogens might have lingered in the atmosphere. We descended the stairs, Sonia and I helping Dimitri, and investigated the rover. It had clearly fallen down the stairs, just as we suspected, but there was also a set of small holes in its side that we couldn't explain. The dog wagged its tail when it reached us. One of the commandos bent down and patted it on its head. He looked at her tag. "Good girl," he said and laughed. "Her name's Alyona, a true hero." "I have a bad feeling about this place," Dimitri said. "I mean, what happened here?" "All these gateways," Sonia said, "just waiting to be connected to some faraway world." "Look," I said and pointed at one of the gateways at the other end of the square. "That one over there is broken, almost as if it was blown up." Although my gut feeling, an uneasy inkling of apprehension, told me to stay away from this forsaken place and return to Earth, my scientific curiosity kept me going. The gateway was indeed in ruins, and by the looks of it, it was the result of an explosion. I looked back at our own gateway, anonymous among the rest of them. If anything was to happen to it, I thought, we would be stranded further away from home than anyone in the history of mankind. "Alexander," I heard Dimitri's voice in my helmet. He was a few hundred meters away from me. "Look at these." There were enormous, seemingly fossilized bones scattered across the ground. Sonia helped us collect some of the smaller pieces while the commandos patrolled the area. Hundreds of small holes covered the brittle fossils, just as if they had been eaten by worms at some point. "This looks like a part of a skull," I said, and pointed to a piece as large as a boulder. "How fascinating. How astonishingly fascinating." "Its size might explain why the gateways are so large," Dimitri said. They might have used their own size as a point of reference. I have a theory, Sonia said. All these gateways, they must have built them to reach out to potentially civilized worlds. But this gateway, this particular gateway, you don't think it just collapsed over time? From natural causes? I asked. Maybe they invited something unfriendly, she said. Something more powerful than the beings who built all of this? Dimitri asked. I took a deep, unsteady breath. If so, I said, the question is, what happened to the ones who destroyed them? Dimitri continued, sending shivers down my spine. I think maybe we should return and... Dimitri was interrupted by the commandos who yelled at us to get behind them. Again, as if they didn't know that in this place we were nothing more than primitive troglodytes. From one of the broad, desolate streets leading to the square, a figure as tall as a building appeared. It limped toward us, slowly stepping into the light. Just by seeing how slow it moved, I understood that it was the source of the footsteps I had heard coming from the sphere on Disappointment Island. It had a skinny, gray body filled with bleeding holes. Its huge head resembled the fossil we had found on the ground, with 10 or more small eyes covering the entire face. No mouth or nose, just unblinking eyes. It moved its long arms in such a way that it looked like it wanted to shoo us away, but it was impossible to say if there was any aggressiveness behind it. Mother of God, Dimitri said. This isn't right. Please, Alexander, take me back. The dog barked furiously, and the commandos prepared to fire out of pure panic. I grabbed Dimitri's wheelchair and instructed everyone to return to our gateway. But just before we were about to move, the alien being collapsed and fell forward. It kicked up a cloud of dust as it hit the ground. For a few minutes, we stood in silence and watched its seemingly dead body. My heart was racing, and I could feel my pulse in my temples. An echo of something large falling to the ground in the distance reached us. The uneasy feeling from before turned into dread, mixed with the uncanny sensation of being watched. A sudden twitch spread through the dead body. And then, to our screams of terror, creatures began escaping through the holes in its skin and even through its many eye sockets. It's hard to describe the abhorrent sight that played out in front of us. These creatures resembled oversized black centipedes. One of them, the largest one, forced itself out through the mouth of the body, and it was at that repulsive moment the commandos opened fire. The spacesuits made it more or less impossible to run, and it felt like running in a nightmare where you never picked up speed no matter how hard you tried. The arthropodic beasts swarmed toward us. One of the smaller ones crawled inside the suit of one of the commandos. I could see it enter his mouth, and then eat its way out one of his eyes. A bigger one crushed the visor of another commando and ripped his head off with his spine still attached to it. I didn't run to save my life. Not even to save the life of my friend, because I knew that only nuclear eradication awaited us on the other side. I ran to save mankind from the same fate that had bestowed the inhabitants around KIC 8462852, and to save myself and my friend from the jaws of the beasts. Even larger creatures, as big as trains, appeared from their hiding spots inside the dark city. The dog ran in front of all of us and was the first to reach the gateway. Dimitri's wheelchair fell over just as I was about to drag it up the stairs. Some of the creatures ran past us, obviously more interested in getting through the gateway than killing us. I bent down and reached for Dimitri's hand. At that moment, Sonia ran up to me and helped put Dimitri back in his wheelchair. More and more creatures entered the gateway, and there was no indication that the warhead had been set off. "Why haven't they detonated the nuke?" I yelled. Since there was no way to open the visor and no time to take the helmet off, I crushed my visor against the ground and yelled toward the sphere as loud as I could. "Blow it up, you fucking cowards! Blow it up!" Sonia helped me drag Dimitri's wheelchair up the stairs. "Leave me here," Dimitri begged. Shut up," I said. "I'm not leaving you with these abominations." 2 commandos ran past us. One got through the gateway, but just moments later his headless body was thrown back through it again. And then Sonia screamed and let go of the wheelchair. I almost dropped it. She put her hands on her helmet in a desperate attempt to take it off, but there wasn't any time. The creature ate its way in through her eye and continued to her brain, making her vomit uncontrollably until she fell down the stairs. It was an absolute miracle that I got through the gateway together with Dimitri. The chaos that met us. I can't even describe it. The women in the choir were being ripped apart. The guards were shooting at each other while naively trying to hit the creatures. The soldiers operating the missile were nowhere to be seen, most likely because they left their post as soon as the first centipede appeared through the gateway. Except for 1 or 2 that were lying dead on the ground, the generals were nowhere to be seen. But helicopters were taking off outside, so it wasn't difficult to figure out where they were. The glass from my visor kept cutting my chest behind the suit as I zigzagged through the mayhem, pulling Dimitri in front of me. I could still hear him through the radio in my helmet. "Leave me next to the missile," he said. "What are you talking about?" I asked, although I already knew. "There is no reason for both of us to stay here." "There's no way any of us get out of here if we succeed," I said. "That's the entire point." "Try," Dimitri said. "You can walk. I can't." I stopped next to the missile, not knowing what to say. "I'll give you some time, unless they get too close to me," Dimitri said. "No time for a sentimental goodbye. My friend, just run." And I did. With tears of shame obstructing my vision, I did. I managed to get inside one of the helicopters that were just about to take off outside. A wife to one of the generals was sitting in it with her little boy who must have been brought to the facility against protocol, just to let him watch history be made. He looked shell-shocked, but he was kept calm by the dog laying on the floor beneath his legs. "You saved her," I said, and tried to smile while the helicopter took off. "You're a hero, young man, a true hero." The facility shrunk beneath us as we rose to the sky, and the further away we got, the more worried I became that one of the creatures had gotten to Dimitri. But then, maybe 1.5 kilometers away, the blinding light from the nuclear explosion overwhelmed us. I don't remember much after that. The shockwave must have hit us pretty hard. I woke up in the rural locality Oimayakon. They told me that they had found the wrecked helicopter in one of the valleys beside the town. The boy and the dog had survived, but the mother and the pilot hadn't. The villagers had seen the mushroom cloud, but other than them, no one would have been able to see the explosion given its remote location. However, the increased radiation levels were detected over Scandinavia sometime later. Naturally, the government kept quiet about the reason, and, Perhaps naively, I truly thought that everything would go back to normal and that we had successfully averted the extinction of all life on Earth. But last week I learned that Aliona had collapsed outside. Apparently, one of her eyes were missing.